Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My brothers and sisters in Islam, I have a question. Why is Ibrahim alayhi salam called Khaleelu Allah? As a Khalil, that is the highest level of friendship that anybody can have. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took Ibrahim as a Khalil. The reason is because he was willing to sacrifice his most beloved thing to him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My brothers and sisters in Islam, the idea of sacrifice is something that we see and that is represented on this day of Eid. On the day of Eid. On the day of Eid, what do? We sacrifice. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he tells us that anybody who is wanting to sacrifice on the day of Eid, that he should avoid clipping his nails for the first 9 days and cutting his hair and removing any skin from himself. Now this is also a sacrifice that you must do. If you're wanting to sacrifice for the sake of Allah, you must also sacrifice the days before. Now what is the idea of sacrifice? Meaning you're choosing something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves over what you love. If you look at the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was willing to sacrifice his dear son. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took him as a Khalil. Because every single test that Allah put him through, he passed that. And he was willing to sacrifice for his sake. So we have to ask ourselves, my brothers and sisters, as we go through these days of Dhul Hijjah and we remember the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the biggest lesson that he teaches us, which is, what are we going to sacrifice for the sake of Allah? What are we going to sacrifice and give up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Maybe I have a swearing problem. I have to sacrifice that for the sake of Allah. Maybe I have bad friends around me. I have to sacrifice that for the sake of Allah. Maybe I listen to music. Or maybe I am too much on social media and I waste my time. You have to sacrifice that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the message that we should have and we should keep in our mind during these days of Dhul Hijjah. That the greatest way to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is if we sacrifice for His sake. So I have a question again. What are you going to sacrifice for the sake of Allah?